last video, I talked about an overview and gave some basic hints about the ACT test. And today we're going to focus more specifically on the English portion of the test, which is my favorite section of the ACT test. The English portion of the test has 75 questions and only 45 minutes to do those questions. Some people make the mistake of wasting time reading the passage when most of the time you don't need to read the passage at all. What you're looking for is the underlined portion and the different answer options for each section. Now, we're going to be breaking the English portion of the ACT test into more than one video because there are lots of different elements of that test. For example, writing and the skills of what makes a good writer versus grammar and usage. Now, part of the test is going to be about what are the correct answers according to grammar skills and punctuation skills that you hopefully are aware of, transition words and what works the best. While some of the questions on that test are more about what makes a good writer and how to recognize what good writing is. So to make it more effective, we're going to break this into different sections. And today, for this first section, we're going to be talking about punctuation. And more importantly, we're going to be talking about the Fanboys, which is an acronym my poor high school students are probably sick of me using over and over and over again because it helps them remember what these words are. The actual word is a conjunction word. And a conjunction word are these little small words that we use quite frequently that help glue together two different ideas. So for example, the word and. I might say, I love you and I love your mom. But I also might say, I love you and your mom. And the trick is memorizing what these fanboys are because the punctuation rules are different for these words. Fanboys sometimes require a comma and sometimes they don't. If you already know what I'm talking about, you can go ahead and skip this video. But if you don't know, this is one of the most important punctuation skills that you need to know before you go into the ACT test. And quite frankly, you should know it anytime you write at all, whether it's a tweet or a text message. Knowing when to use punctuation helps make your writing more clear. So first, let's determine what the conjunction words are, because there are not many. That's why we call them fanboys. F-A-N-B-O-Y-S, and each letter represents one of these words. The trick about these conjunction words is when you have one of these small fanboys that glue two complete independent sentences together, you need a comma. If one side of that fanboy is not a complete sentence, then you do not use a comma. So what you've got to do is identify, is there a fanboy in the sentence, or does there need to be a fanboy in the sentence for the punctuation to work correctly, or which punctuation should I use because there's a fanboy in the sentence? So we'll get into that. I'm going to show you some example questions on the ACT test, but first let's identify what the fanboys are. I tell my students that you need to have these words memorized before you walk into the test. So here's what they are if you have never heard of it before. F stands for the word for, and not in the way of this is for my sister, but in an old-fashioned way of saying, I love you, for you are so beautiful. The next one on the list is our most commonly used word, which is the word and. I love you and you are so beautiful. The next word is nor. We don't use this very often, but I don't love you, nor do I love your brother. The next word is my favorite word on the list, which is the word but, because I like big butts. I love you, but you stink. The next word on the list is or. I like to eat rice, or I like to eat beans. The next word on the list is the word yet. I like you, yet I wish you would go home. And the last word on the list is so. I love you, so will you be my girlfriend? Now, when you have one of these fanboy words in your sentence, you got to determine if everything that comes before the fanboy is a complete sentence on its own and can stand independently, and if everything after the fanboy is a complete sentence on its own and can stand independently. If both sides of the fanboy are complete independent sentences, then you need to have a comma in between it. So for example, I love you, comma, but you stink. I love you is a complete sentence. You stink is a complete sentence. I use a fanboy in the middle and glue it together, and then we need a comma. If we have a fanboy and one side is not a complete sentence, for example, I love you and your mom, period. I love you is a complete sentence, but your mom is not a complete sentence. It's not a complete thought. It can't stand independent. So therefore, you do not use a comma in this situation. Now, the reason it's so important to know these fanboys before the ACT test is there are lots of different ways the ACT test is going to try to trick you on fanboy questions. I'm going to show you a couple. Before I do, quick review. Remember, this is not just for the ACT test. This is anytime you write. When you use one of these conjunction words, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Did I get them all? You've got to determine if you have an independent sentence before and after the fanboy. And if one side of that is not an independent sentence, you'll have to look at different reasons you might need punctuation. I'm going to show you some examples from this exactly from the test. Question number 6 here is a perfect example of how they might use this on an ACT test. It was actually taken from an ACT test. The sentence is, today Luigi's battery is fully charged. I know I can go all the way to the end of the trail and back. Here in this question, the word charged has the comma attached, and in all 4 of the responses, F is no change, G has the comma there, H has the comma there, and J has the comma there. Because all 4 of these options have commas, I'm going to look at the sentence and determine, is there a complete sentence before this and a complete sentence after this? So before says, Luigi's battery is fully charged. Is that a complete sentence? Luigi's battery, subject, is, verb, fully charged. Yes. Complete thought. Everything after this now, I know I can go all the way to the end of the trail and back. Is that a complete sentence? I know I can go all the way to the end of the trail and back. Yes, I, subject, no verb, can go all the way to the end of the trail and back. That's a complete thought. So now I have 2 complete thoughts with a comma in between them. This tells me that if I'm going to keep that comma, I have to have a fanboy to glue this together. I'm going to look at the options here. There's only one of these options that include a fanboy off of that list, F-A-N-B-O-Y-S, which is there in the option J, charged, comma, so. This is one way the ACT test might have this type of question. Let's look at another. Look at question 21 here. Now this is interesting. It says, as early as 1865, there had been proposals for a New York subway, but that took decades to resolve the many political, financial, and technical challenges. So I look at this and I see that it's asking if we should have the word that there, or if I should change it to the word it, those, or delete it completely. Well, there's a trick to this. Even though there's no comma change in this option, I notice that there is one right before this. It's New York subway, comma, but, comma, fanboy. That means that everything before the comma fanboys has got to be a complete sentence, and everything after the comma fanboy has got to be a complete sentence. So I look at everything before. As early as 1865, there had been proposals for a New York subway. Is that a complete sentence? Yes. There had been proposals. There, subject, had been, verb, proposals, object. That's a complete thought. Now everything after it, but that took decades to resolve the many political, financial, and technical challenges. I know I need to make this a complete sentence. So let's look through these options. That took decades to resolve. It took decades to resolve. Those took decades to resolve. Or do I delete it and just say took decades to resolve? Only one of these options is a complete sentence with a clear subject and a clear verb. What we're looking for in this question is to make sure that we have a subject in the sentence. And only one of these is a really clear subject, and that is the word it. It took decades to resolve. Subject, it. Took, verb, decades. That's my complete thought. Another one I found interesting was question number 12, where it says, bicyclists streak past in a blur of color and a cloud of dust. I don't understand their hurry. When I look at this, I see the different options for punctuation. Either have F, no change, which means no punctuation at all. D, dust, comma, however. H, dust, period. J, dust, comma. So let's look at this and determine, is it a complete sentence before and a complete sentence after the word dust? Bicyclists streak past in a blur of color and a cloud of dust. Subject, bicyclists. Verb, streak. Past in a blur of color and a cloud of dust. That's a complete thought. And then on the second part of that, I don't understand their hurry. I, subject, don't understand, verb, their hurry, object. Once more, I've got 2 complete sentences here. Some really good options for this would be to add a comma and a fanboy. To say, bicyclists streak past in a blur of color and a cloud of dust, comma, and I don't understand their hurry. Or bicyclists streak past in a blur of color and a cloud of dust, comma, but I don't understand their hurry. These options would work, but sadly, there are no fanboy options here. Notice in F, G, H, and J, not one of these include a fanboy, which means the answer cannot be a comma. And when I look at the other options, I have one option that's a period. The other option here is to leave it with nothing. Now I know when I have 2 independent sentences that can stand alone, we don't want to leave it without punctuation. There needs to be something there. It might be a semicolon, but another really great option is here, and that is a period. Bicyclist streaked past in a blur of color and a cloud of dust, period. New sentence, I don't understand their hurry, period. Even though you can't see fanboys here, you can see how fanboys affect punctuation. F, G, and J all had commas, which would require you to have a fanboy if you were going to keep the comma. The word however on G is trying to trick you because that is not a fanboy. This is why it's important to memorize the fanboys. Sometimes I'll put in words there like as or because. Those are not fanboys. Because is not a fanboy. So many people put commas before the word because. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. There's no reason to put a comma before the word because when you have two independent sentences working together. Really understanding how these conjunction words work in writing will help you on the ACT test. And understanding when to use a comma, when to use a semicolon, when to use a period, and when to use no punctuation at all is going to depend in part on whether or not they have fanboy words in the sentences. So check for fanboys. And our next video is going to focus more on other elements of punctuation, semicolons, colons, and dashes, when to use all of those things. Punctuation is the math of English. There are right answers and there are wrong answers. There are skills you need to learn in order to get these questions right. They're also the quick questions to answer on the ACT test when you know what to look for. So, we'll get the next video going soon.